Welcome to r/Malicious Compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter but not the spirit of a request. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. New manager is not happy with what he thinks is relaxed attitude at work. End up with the worst quarter while receiving our monthly bonus. The second story. Former wife wanted to take the hut, but in the end did not receive it. The third story. Boss did not allow me to come later, and she had to hire another employee and pay him. Today's first story is: manager wants team to hit his made-up targets? Okay, we'll hit the useless targets. Let me first start with stating that this happened in one of the top companies of the country, in the sales department. Unfortunately, I have a whole lot more about this guy, but for now, this will do. The sales team consists of very capable people. It's important because we had to do everything from A to Z in terms of sales. This means searching for potential clients, making them warm so they sign, and finishing the contract. But also, things such as background checks and follow-up. It is a legitimate business. Who are the real shareholders? Start the integration of client, and be contact person during the first months. So there's more work happening than only selling. This is important for the story. The manager we had was a delight to work for. Working under her enabled us to be more autonomous. We knew what our monthly targets were, and we had to work up to that. Nothing else mattered. That's what was important for her and the higher-ups. The targets were quarterly calculated by the analysts, and double-checked by our manager if they were realistic. The team consists of 10 to 15 people. Everyone has their own region, some in a different country. This way there's no hostility between the salespersons, and everybody works around their own schedule. Some like doing certain tasks before lunch on a Friday and others on a Tuesday. But it doesn't matter because we always hit the target, which is not an easy one either, every single month. And during the quarterly meetings, all the numbers are green. In comes the new manager. The guy's a mess. I can list at least 15 things why he shouldn't manage people, but that's not why we're here. But the worst part is that he wants to be magically better than the previous manager, and quadrillion-duple sales during his first month he's in charge. This is how he does it. Bear in mind that we always said our concerns about the changes to him, but he's a guy with a plan. First, he made us log everything we did twice. We keep logs of everything we do in the system, so it's stored in the database for archives and whatnot. We also keep notes on a shared Excel sheet, which helps the analyst for making targets. All this logging wasn't enough. He wanted us to make another sheet just for him, without analyst or higher up in it, where he could put remarks on for the team to see. Probably because the remarks weren't about improving, but about how we were lazy. But hey, we did what the man asked for. The logs will be important later. Secondly, he doesn't like that if he wants to check his team, he has to check them individually. What does he make us do? Use one effing mail for the whole team. So me and my colleagues, also those who speak another language, because sales for different country but also same team, have one shared mailbox. The only distinction we have is the signatures at the end of the reply mails are our names, mentioned by the clients in their mail. You can already see the mess from this. This change alone made working in an organized fashion difficult. But guess what? Here comes change number 3. Thirdly and lastly, for the sake of the length of the post, the targets. How should I describe this one? The targets are based on being profitable and also being realistic. Considering we do more than just calling or mailing the clients, he thinks that everything else that's beside a client putting ink on the paper is a waste of time. So he recalculates the targets using the logs we filled for him and gave us around 30 minutes per day for all the other stuff we do. All these combined made the following scenario possible. In comes the quarterly meeting. Of course, with a report from an analyst that compared results with previous years and other teams. Every single number is red. We failed for almost everything. Remember that up until now, the only number that mattered for him, his monthly target, was the amount of clients that signed. Our team had failed for everything but that. Lucky for us, we hit his target, so we all had our bonus while having the worst quarter. What was the fallout, you ask? The changes he made were so big, he basically minimized some heavy time-consuming tasks in a way where we didn't have to do them. And with no time, I mean him constantly coming up to us to say, "Hey, aren't you already doing that for too long now? Get back to calling." As before mentioned, every salesperson has his own region, and if in a specific region more clients want to stop working with us within the first 3 months, or clients who agreed upon the service weeks ago, but faulty integration meant they still couldn't use the service, and now they want to stop. We would know which region, and evidently who his salesperson is doing a bad job. Soon he started finding weak spots in the team. With weak spots, I meant colleagues. It would be that salesperson's fault for being lazy, or slow working attitude, that led to those clients to leave or not be satisfied with us as a company. First, he targeted the colleague who worked there for the longest. He was really used to the other system and had an attitude of "this is already dumb, why put effort in it?" Honestly, he was the one suffering the most from these changes because he had the bigger and VIP clients. All these clients care more about the service, the less important tasks we provided. The manager would sometimes sit next to him 4 to 5 hours a day just to help him improve what he does, but then complain to us as a manager behind his back about how many stupid mistakes he makes and how bad he is. This is a big A red flag for me. A manager that talks dirt behind his own team members, especially when the salesperson was doing a good job prior to him. This led to the poor B having meetings with the higher-ups. To be fair, during these meetings, the manager would point out the guy's failing points, which in the manager's new way of working were indeed real failing points for him. But we contracting 3 to 4 times more small-medium clients cannot be compared to him calling big high-profile clients. But the new manager convinced the higher-ups that if you would compare him with the rest of the team, it looked like he was slacking off. He was getting ready to be fired. In the end, after I left, they fired him the same week. Next, the manager started looking at my region and started asking questions. But really, he was just trying to find a way to pressure me. I had the biggest region, so more clients contacted and signed, but all the other stuff, I was way behind. And him coming more often to my desk and monitoring me for 4 to 5 hours didn't help either, because then he didn't allow me to do the other things. And also, he was peeved when I ran fast through my list of potential clients, with no time for preparing for a call or whatsoever. Of course, the conversion rate will drop, and he kept saying, well, insert random team member does it so much better, without considering the differences in the regions and country. Well, I got the hint, started looking for another job fast. Before I left, the higher-ups started asking questions. They saw the same mistakes as the guy that was getting ready to be fired, but couldn't understand why we aren't motivated enough anymore. It's not motivation. We have wrong goals we work up to now. I gave my notice and left. The week I wasn't there, the other guy got fired, and now 2 others left. Last I heard, it was still an SH show. The next story is: wife tries to force husband's family to sell their grandfather's cabin to buy her out in divorce. The brother of a good friend of mine went through a divorce last year. The divorce was fairly messy. His soon-to-be ex-wife was trying to get as much as she could. My friend and his siblings all jointly inherited their grandfather's cabin a few months earlier. It's situated on a private island in Canada that's been owned by the family for 4 generations. It's about 5,000 square feet and easily worth over $3 million, and their grandfather had several unexpected private offers over that value, all refused with no interest in selling. The family was notified by her lawyer that she was requesting payment to buy her out of her 1/6 ownership, each sibling owning 1/3 of the land, and she was trying to claim half of her husband's share. They tried to discuss a few alternatives, such as giving her a 1/6 right to usage but no ownership. She declined, apparently intent on forcing them to sell it, knowing none of them could afford to front the money to their brother to keep the cabin in their ownership. Their lawyer, a family friend, did a bunch of work to find a favorable solution for them. In looking over the grandfather's will, he discovered that the divorcing brother did not in fact own any part of the island with the cabin on it. It seemed that their grandfather bought up a bunch of other islands nearby the cabin and willed them to his grandchildren separately. He only owned a small nearby island, made up of rocks and gravel, not big enough to build on, and not worth any money at all. Not wanting to give her anything at all, they made her an offer, attempting to look like they were giving her more than she deserved, and with the appearance of being desperate to keep the ownership of the cabin, to give her 75% usage rights of the island for 25 years, with no ownership. In the offer, they named the worthless island by its legal land title name. She made a counteroffer which was identical, but she wanted to add her rights to rent the island out for profit, and she wanted choice over her time allocation, which she drafted in the offer. They agreed. Apparently, her new boyfriend was more interested in the cabin than the money. They made her a set of keys for the cabin. They were keys for a master lock for their life jacket storage box on the dock at shore, as well as a fake key with a bright yellow floating foam keychain to give her the impression that there would be a boat available to get to the island. They allowed her to believe her deal was for the cabin's island for quite a while, as the divorce was still not finalized. Her first weekend with the island was a long weekend, and she invited her family out, along with her new boyfriend, a 400-kilometer drive, and were greeted by my friend's dad and their lawyer. The whole thing was planned by their lawyer, who I'm fairly good friends with as well. He tells me that her family was stranded on the island for hours, as they hired a barge to ferry them over, and they waited until the barge left before going over the details of what she agreed to. He says she attempted legal action once more after that, accusing the family of fabricating the will after the fact. Apparently, her lawyer dropped the case before it even started. Update: I had a bunch of the facts wrong on this story. My friend says that the cabin was not an inheritance at all. The siblings purchased it jointly. Apparently, their grandfather had the cabin as an asset that was owned by his business. The business was bought by another company before he passed away, and the siblings quickly bought the cabin back when they discovered that it was sold. Also, the cabin was apparently not owned by the family for generations. It was a group of islands next to the cabin's island they owned for generations. It seems the grandfather bought several more islands and had the cabin built to bring clients and business partners out for fishing trips. However, while the cabin and the land it was built on were not inheritances, the other group of islands were an inheritance. My friend's brother was already separated from his wife when they acquired the cabin. The wife was misinformed by a family member that the cabin was an inheritance. The last story. Was told I had an 8.5-hour shift and not to leave early, so I started working for only 8.5 hours. I work as a supervisor at a manufacturing plant, and I was hired for an 8-hour shift as the night supervisor. As soon as I started, they changed and said they really considered the shift to be from 11 p.m. to 7:30, so they would need it to be 8.5 hours. I'm salaried, there wasn't much I could do, and it wasn't a big deal, so I said okay. As I get into a groove working there, I find out that the second shift supervisor is a train wreck. No one would describe him to me, just saying I had to meet him. He leaves an hour or two early from his shift 2 to 3 times a week. Friday nights he leaves the plant at 5:30 and tells them to call him if there are any problems. He calls out at a minimum once a week. It's psychotic. Every time he's out, I come in at around 8 p.m. to cover the last 3 hours of his shift, and my full shift. At least once a week, I just do it. I figured the company is going to deal with it, but as time passes, they obviously aren't. Structurally, the company is just as bad as him. Infighting, rivalries, backstabbing, all that. But I stay on nights so I don't see it much. Then Sarah starts as my boss. I actually have 2 bosses, which is how every successful employee works. Sarah is a nightmare. Sarah wants me to work 11 to 11 on MTW, and 11 to 10 on Friday. I dig in my heels, document like crazy, and after a couple of months of harassment, HR actually backs me up, and she has to stop. But now Sarah is angry, and she sees me leaving at 7:15 one morning after coming in 2 hours early. She sends an email clarifying our time expectations. Second shift train wreck calls in that night, so I come in at 8, and the next morning Sarah sees me leave at 7:10. I get an email saying she's coming in early to talk to me, and when she shows up, I'm getting a formal warning for my early departures, going into my personnel file. I've never been written up in my life. During the meeting with HR in attendance, she said I'm expected to be there for my 8.5-hour shift. I made sure that the expectation was on record for an 8.5-hour shift, which HR documented. The next week, the second shift supervisor is out 2 days. After the first day, Sarah asks me the next morning why I didn't come in early, as there were problems on his shift, and I said I fulfilled my 8.5-hour shift, and I'm not responsible for this. They had to hire a contractor at $125 an hour to cover all of his missed time, which amounted to 19 weeks this past year. Eventually, they hired a 4th supervisor at $85,000 per year to cover his gaps. Sarah got demoted, and I only ever work 8.5 hours. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.